Another ballot, another political gridlock. Benjamin Netanyahu could hold on to power after Israelis vote for the fourth time in 2 years. But without a clear majority, will voters have to head back to the polls again? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Israel's general election. Now, votes are still being counted, but what's clear following Tuesday's election is that while Israelis haven't rejected their current prime minister, they are still not fully behind him either. Neither Netanyahu nor his opponents could convince voters to hand them a clear majority of Knesset seats, so now coalition building begins again. Israel's complex parliamentary system means Netanyahu can only be replaced as PM if a large enough assembly of left, right, and centrist factions agree to disagree and form a coalition themselves. Now, Israeli governments are always coalition arrangements, and some say the likelihood of Netanyahu or his opponents cobbling together a viable one is slim. And with charges of fraud and corruption still haunting the PM, the outcome of this election could determine if he spends the years ahead in jail or in politics. Natalie Pohonen has more on Israel's latest round of political gridlock.
4 elections in less than 2 years. The sense of voting fatigue in Israel is unmistakable. These polls have become Israel's version of Groundhog Day, and the electorate is over it.
It's tiring, exhausting, despairing.
The whole way the campaign is going it's like kids playing in the daycare.
Israel's political system involves numerous parties, and that means governments are built on coalitions. There are 120 seats in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. The path to governing requires 61 of those spots. In recent years, Israelis have watched on as fraught partnerships and fractured alliances have led to breakups and the inevitable political impasse it brings. At the helm of it all has been Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who heads the right-wing Likud party. He was quick to declare victory on election night, but that's a preemptive call. Neither the right-wing bloc nor the centre-left parties appear to have the numbers to form a majority. The political horse trading to arrange a new stable of coalition mates has only just begun.
ממשלה יציבה למדינת ישראל. זה מה שהשעה מחייבת, זה מה שהאתגרים שלפנינו מחייבים, ואסור לנו בשום אופן לגרור את מדינת ישראל לבחירות חדשות, לבחירות חמישיות. להקים ממשלה יציבה עכשיו.
One of his potential coalition partners could be his former defence minister turned critic, the ultra-nationalist Naftali Bennett.
I am determined to advance the values of the right in every government that will be formed. But a real right-winger does not hate, he unites.
Another prospective Netanyahu backer could be Mansour Abbas, who heads the United Arab List, a conservative religious party that's split from the Joint List. The opposition centrist party, Yesh Atid, has also entered the alliance-building game.
I've started speaking to party leaders and will wait for the results, but will do everything to create a sane government in Israel.
Coalitions come down to numbers, and right now they're inconclusive for everyone. For many voters, this election was a referendum on Netanyahu's leadership. He's Israel's longest-serving PM, and under his watch, the political landscape has moved further to the right. There was little focus on Israel's relationship with Palestinians during this election. Netanyahu instead campaigned on his security credentials, normalizing of ties with several Arab states and spearheading the country's successful coronavirus vaccination drive. But he's also become an increasingly divisive political figure. There have been weekly demonstrations for more than half a year calling on the PM to resign. He's currently on trial for corruption charges after being indicted last year for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. Netanyahu denies the allegations. If he was hoping for a decisive victory from Tuesday's vote, it's failed to materialize. which means there's a real possibility voters will be heading to election number 5. Natalie Perhanen, The Newsmakers.
Okay, let's get straight to our panel now. And from West Jerusalem, Nadav Tamir is a former diplomat, former advisor to Shimon Peres, and executive director of J Street Israel. Also in West Jerusalem, Mitchell Barak. He is a political analyst and former aide to Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as a former speechwriter for Ariel Sharon. And rounding out our panel is Sami Abu Shahadeh. He is a member of the Knesset and leader of the Arab-Israeli Ballot party. He joins us now from Jaffa. Thanks all so much for being with us. Greatly appreciated. Mitchell, I'll start with you. We heard Netanyahu say there that we must form a stable government now. We know we've heard that before. Is there anything different in the equation now, this time, to avoid a 5th vote?
We always like to ask, why is this election different from all the other 4 elections? And I don't really have a good answer. We don't have the final figures yet. It could jump either way for either way. It seems like there's a tie between the 2 blocs. But the best advantage Netanyahu has right now is that he's a sitting prime minister. He's in charge of 38 ministers, all of whom want to stay ministers, even though some of them ran against him. So it's not clear if he's going to be able to entice people from other parties. And he's going to push the carrot and the stick, the carrot being ministries, chairmanships in the Knesset, or other goodies, or even budgets. And the stick is the 5th election, threatening that there could be a 5th election. On the other hand, you have some opposition. With those opposition parties may have enough to get to 61. It'll be interesting because the Arab parties, of which you have a representative, might play a more direct role or even indirect role in helping a government form, either with Netanyahu, which is certainly an outside chance, or against Netanyahu.
Right. You know, I feel like I've repeated this expression so many times in recent days. You know, Einstein's definition of insanity being to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Does this equate to insanity? We could be seeing the 5th election in 2 years. Why? Why is it going to be different? Is there a problem in the system that just needs to be addressed?
Well, there is and there isn't. Insanity is one thing, but stubbornness is much more important here. And Netanyahu is extremely stubborn, feels that he is the leader of
Go ahead.
Israel. And he feels that he's the leader of Israel, so he's going to keep fighting and keep having elections. So that's the one thing. Inherently, there is something in a system that you can have 4 elections in a row and not have a decisive victory, excuse me. But the Knesset is built so that only 120 members, one of them has to be the prime minister. So really, all you need is 61 of them from whichever party to find someone that they agree on and try and put that person as prime minister.
Right.
So I think it's more of a failure of the people than it is of the system.
A failure of the people. You know what, Nadav, let me ask you. Some are saying this is kind of a failure of democracy, actually, because, you know, according to polls, and I know polls can be questionable, but according to most polls in Israel, most Israelis don't actually want Netanyahu to continue as prime minister, and a large majority actually reject the role of ultra-Orthodox parties. But because of the politics of coalition building, Israel ends up with what the majority doesn't actually want.
No, I can't really hear.
Okay, unfortunately, I think Nadav can't hear us right now. So, Sami, let me address that to you. Do you see failures in this model of democracy in Israel?
No, I don't think that this is the serious problem in the Israeli political system. I think that the main issue, which is not being spoken till now, including not in the Israeli media, is the danger of what Netanyahu has brought us to, what Professor Zev Sternel from the Hebrew University a few years wrote about, that Israel is deteriorating to be the next fascist regime in modern history. Now, if you are seeing the results of the latest elections, it should be something which is warning for everyone in the whole world. When you are having people like Itamar Ben-Gvir and you are having people like Bezalel Smotrich, people who carry very dangerous fascist way of thinking, people who carry in their political programs words like genocide, words like total war, words like transfer, words like the destruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque, and a lot of other dangerous thoughts. And nobody is really dealing with them as something to be feared of, or to something that they should criticize or go against. When Netanyahu has brought us to a very, very dangerous political fascist system in Israel. This is what we should be care about. What we should care about more than if we will have fifth election or not. There is very clear question regarding the fifth election. Netanyahu has taken us for 4 elections in 2 years for one clear reason. He doesn't want to go to jail. Any elections that does not bring this result, we will be heading to the next elections. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, as the strongest personality in the Israeli political system, is able to run the Israeli political system, all of it, the state of Israel and its ministries, according to his own files, and he simply does not want to go to jail.
Okay.
If the next coalition will prevent him from going to jail, there will be no elections. If they will not give me this promise, we'll be going for another election.
Mitchell, go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't heard any member of Knesset or potential member of Knesset talk about genocide. Did you hear anyone speak publicly about murdering innocent civilians? Because that's what you're suggesting. And I don't think as a member of Knesset you should suggest that. If Itamar Ben-Gvir, I don't remember him ever. He said some horrible things, but he is not said to kill innocent people. I think you're exaggerating here, and it's dangerous what you're doing. Has he called for genocide? Has he called to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque?
Okay,
I have not heard him say that.
Let Sammy get a response quickly.
Exaggerating.
Sir, and he has 3 pages. I think you did not do the basic efforts to read them as his political program. In his political program, he calls my people, the Palestinians, as the enemies. And he says that Israel should be able to lehashmid. He uses the word in Hebrew, hashmada, of the enemy, which is, in this case, my people, sir. Now, I think that one of our biggest challenges in the Israeli political system is that the Jewish majority in Israel are much less sensitive when they are racist. They are very sensitive when they are victims of racism, but they are much less sensitive when they are the racist parts.
Mitchell, do you think that's fair?
I think that's a reasonable thing. I mean, I think Israelis have been desensitized to the fact that many of them say horrible and nasty things about the Israeli Arab population, and that, it's become acceptable parlance in politics here to say, I will not form a government with Israeli Arabs, who represent 20% of the population. They're in the Knesset. They're in every industry possible, and they're full and equal members of society. I will disagree, though, with, again, I'm not an expert on Mr. Ben-Gvir. I find him to be a disgraceful individual, personally. But I think he's referring to, when he says Palestinians, that would be more the people who are living under the Palestinian Authority, who would define themselves as terrorists, or who would support terrorist acts, who would pay terrorists. And I think that's really what he's referring to. I don't believe in any way that he's referring to Israeli Arabs. But I think, I will take your lead, and Israel has a long way to go among Israeli Jews, which is to respect Israeli Arabs more, to be sensitive to some of the things they say, and to include them in the government, if that's what will work out, and not think that it's a problem. And I do agree that Jews here are very sensitive to anti-Semitism and other things, and they should be more sensitive to others.
Okay. Sammy, I need to ask you then about Israeli Arabs. You went from about 65% turnout in the last election, getting 15 seats or so for the joint list, to 51% turnout in this election, and you only look to get 6 to 10 seats. What happened? Where did the participation go?
First of all, in the last 2 decades, big part of our population, big part of the Arab-Palestinian minority in Israel, lost their trust with the elections in Israel, because as a Palestinian minority, we are suffering from all kinds of racism in all fields of life in the state of Israel. And we don't have a serious partner in the Zionist parties, which is struggling with us for equality and justice for all the citizens. So people are losing much of their hopes and much of their trust in voting because they are not seeing serious change. And in the last few years, a lot of horrible things has been going on in the Arab-Palestinian society, mainly by the decision of the Israeli state to leave the Arab-Palestinian minority for all these criminal teams that we are having in our community. And we have daily killings, and people are quite frustrated from the violence of these mafias, and Israel is doing nothing in order to stop these mafias. The Israeli-Palestinian minority also suffered much more from the coronavirus in all fields of life, in education, in economy, in everything. So we got into these elections in a very, very negative atmosphere. And this is why people voted much less. We have a lot of challenges.
Okay. But you have Mansour Abbas hanging in the mix. Some of his critics say, you know, he's a sellout because he's potentially looking to cooperate with Netanyahu and other parties in order to stay in the mix and keep his relevance. I mean, but is he also potentially giving then Arab Israelis the only voice they're going to have in the Knesset?
First of all, I don't think they are going to deal with him because they are racist also against Mansour Abbas, no matter what does he think now. But I think that from Netanyahu's point of view, Mansour Abbas already has given him what he really wanted. He wanted to bring down the representation of the Arab-Palestinian minority in the Knesset. We went down from 15, seems to be, to 10 or 11. From Netanyahu's point of view, Abbas has done his work. He can now continue going home. He will not deal with him anymore. Unfortunately, he found Abbas, and that was already ready to collaborate with him in order to bring down our power in the Knesset. But I think that Abbas has ended his historical role from Netanyahu's point of view. We will not be hearing about him in the next few weeks.
Very interesting. Mitchell, you know, there's a similar dynamic, one could actually argue, in the conservative parties, in Jewish representation in Israel. And now it seems people are worried about Naftali Bennett and Benjamin Netanyahu being at the mercy of those ultra-Orthodox parties that you also don't have a lot of time for, but that they will have to kowtow to their potentially being kingmakers in the Knesset.
Well, the ultra-Orthodox parties have been in almost every government because they don't have any foreign policy demands, even any security demands. What they're interested is, you know, maintaining their way of life and supporting their educational institutions, their yeshivas. So they're very easy. I mean, they like Netanyahu because he leaves them alone, and basically you make a deal with them and they don't change. Netanyahu can, conduct diplomacy, do whatever he needs, and they don't bother him. At the same time, it might be an opportunity for them to go with Yair Lapid. It's an outside chance, but at the end of the day, if they see that Netanyahu is not going to make it, they may decide for their way of life and budgets for their yeshivas, for their institutions, it may be worth it to consider going with Lapid. But there is a lot of animosity in Israel towards this sector of society. They don't serve in the army, nor do the Israeli Arabs. But for Israeli Jews, they do not serve in the army. They continue to learn in their yeshivas. Many of them don't work. The men learn really for all their lives. So in that way, they don't contribute to the economy. And a lot of people saw that they were not so careful when it came to the coronavirus restrictions. And they continue to keep their schools open, had weddings, bar mitzvahs, and these things. So a lot of Israelis would like to keep them out of the government. And there were some parties, including Lieberman's party, including some of the left of center parties, Meretz, that ran on a campaign of not sitting with them. But a lot of that is electioneering, and we'll have to see how that plays out now.
So yes, Israel is very proud of protecting women's rights, Arab Israeli rights, they will say, and a very strong LGBTQ community. But now, again, you're facing these ultra-Orthodox parties entering a coalition, and they are openly racist and very openly homophobic. Mitchell, is that the direction that Israelis
No,
Go ahead.
because they've been in the government now. So all of the legislation supporting the gay lifestyle has been in the Knesset for a while, and it hasn't really been a problem. So I don't see it being a problem. I will take Sammy's point that there's a lot of violence and crime in the Israeli Arab community, and there isn't a lot of enforcement going on by the police and the government, and that is really not fair. And it is not reasonable. And there are people that live in fear there. And in fact, there were representatives of the government that said, you should handle those things yourself within your own communities. That's a horrible thing to say. Citizens, they're citizens, and they should be protected by the police. So I think that is more of an issue rather than what influence the ultra-Orthodox will have, because they've basically been in the government already. So we're not going to see anything new from the ultra-Orthodox.
Okay, Sammy, I see you agree.
I agree that the way the Israeli state is dealing with the Arab-Palestinian minority is a very racist way, and I think one of the biggest issues that proves this is the way the Israeli police is dealing with crime in the Arab-Palestinian minority. In the same police system deals totally differently when the victim of violence and when the victims of crime are Jews or if they are Arabs. So this is one of the biggest proofs of the racism and discrimination that we suffer from as Arab Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel.
Okay.
I'm not sure regarding the religious Jewish parties. I don't think that they want to enforce their way of living on the rest of the society.
Okay.
They just want to have their own way of living. They don't want anyone to enforce on them a different way of living. Maybe when we think about the future of a better democratic society in Israel, we should be much more serious regarding a multicultural life and a multicultural political system, because there's a lot of different minority groups living inside the Israeli state, includes the Arab Palestinian minority and the Jewish religious groups, the Russians, different. So maybe that would be much kind of a better democratic system for all. But this is for the long run. Meanwhile, we should all think about the serious Israeli results when very racist and dangerous people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir are going to be part of the next Israeli government.
Okay. Sammy, I have to ask you quickly as well, because, the Israeli turnout, the end result of this election, many are asking how it might influence in elections in the Palestinian territories that are set to happen in May. If hardliners become more influential in Israel, how might that affect Palestinians in the territories?
Totally on the margins. I think that the decision for Palestinian elections has been taken from Palestinian interests and from Palestinian negotiations. I think they are going to continue with the elections because they are seeing it as a good strategic solution for all the very hard situation in the West Bank and Gaza. I hope they will continue with this project of the elections. I like to think that it's going to continue. I'm not sure about that.
Okay. I just have a few minutes left, Mitchell, and I have to get to, of course, the all-important, as far as foreign relations for Israel is concerned, relationship with the United States. Netanyahu lost his best friend and ally in Donald Trump. It's not that Joe Biden is an enemy at all of Israel, but he is, pro two-state solution, something that Israel's pretty much lost sight of. Where do you see the U.S.-Israel relationship going?
Well, I think it'll be a fresh start. Certainly, Joe Biden has been in the Senate and vice president. He's been in public office for close to 40 years, and he's been a great friend of Israel. And I think that we've already gotten the free lunch from Donald Trump. Everything on the wish list of Netanyahu and Likud, we've gotten, whether it's Jerusalem as a capital, the Golan Heights, the embassy, the Iran deal, canceling that. We've gotten everything. And now it's going to be time to pay for that. And I think the Biden administration, after they kind of deal with the issues in America right now, which is the economy and coronavirus, and they start to reach out into the world, then the Palestinian-Israeli issue and that conflict will be part of it. But I think the forces have changed because we now have agreements with some of the other Arab countries, And in fact, in polling that I did for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, among many Arab countries, including Morocco, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, the Palestinian issue is very important to these countries. Whereas the Palestinians in the West Bank feel abandoned by the Emirates and by Bahrain, those countries, as well as Saudi Arabia, feel a loyalty. And I think we're going to see that jump start. Not in this year, but I think next year we're going to see a jump start, and we may even see some results, some positive results.
Excellent. Mitchell, I'm going to have to give you the last word. So unfortunately, we're out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank you both so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Thanks to our viewers, as always, as well. We'll see you next time.